Call of Duty has never shied away from creating experimental modes and experiences in their games. Majority of these experiences are often selling points for titles, but what if I told you there was a hidden experience in Black Ops 3 that you never knew existed, or at the very least completely forgot existed? Real quick before we get into it, my analytics show that about 99.3 of you are not subscribed. It would be amazing if you could hit that button and support the channel. Also, while you're down there, if you like the video, make sure to press the like button as that also helps out the channel. With that said, let's get into the video. Nightmares was released with the launch of Black Ops 3 as a hidden mode that is now unlocked to everyone upon launching the game. Nightmares was the first and only time Call of Duty tried to make a zombies-based campaign, and if I'm being honest, I didn't even know Nightmares existed until I was doing research for the Abandoned Modes video a while back. On launch, Nightmares was unlocked in one of two ways. The first way was to simply complete the campaign, after which the Nightmares mode would appear in the main menu. The other way to unlock Nightmares was to enter the code Dreamland into the data vault in the Black Ops 3 campaign safe house. Upon my first playthrough of Nightmares, the mode really felt like a pieced together mode with really no reason to exist. That was until I looked into it a little more. You see, it wasn't until the recent interview with Jason Blundell that the community really learned about Nightmares in depth. Nightmares was developed as a sixth core mode of Black Ops 3 within roughly 2 months by two main developers as an extra after completing their original tasks for other modes. With this insight, Nightmares wasn't simply an extra mode. It was a miracle that it was ever created and went back to what made zombies great originally. It was a passion project among a few developers. The gameplay of Nightmares is truthfully my biggest complaint about the mode as a whole. The majority of the mechanics in Nightmares are heavily based on the campaign, with every mission location being one from the campaign. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it makes the story of Nightmares carry a lot of the weight. But we'll get into the overall story a little bit and see if it really did carry the weight of the mode. Nightmares has the player face off against 5 main enemy types, with 3 of them being from the Zombies launch map Shadows of Evil. Zombies, parasites, and meatballs, which I'm just now finding out are actually called Insanity Elemental. I think the community came up with a pretty good name for these guys. The player also comes across human enemies that are tied into the storyline, as well as robot enemies, which include the GI unit and Cerberus score streaks from multiplayer. While we are on the topic of borrowed content from other modes, Nightmares also includes the cyber cores from the campaign, allowing the player to have extra abilities. Nightmares also brings the advanced movement mechanics of multiplayer and campaign into this mode. Nightmares includes some key features of the Zombies modes, but they are modified slightly. The mystery box, which has been renamed to the magic box, appears in Nightmares. However, this version is completely free for the player to interact with, compared to the Zombies version, which costs 950 points, with the box not moving location over time. Power-ups also return with a twist. The classic insta-kill and max ammo return, with the addition of a golden insta-kill that will freeze zombies in place, also making them weaker. The final and probably most important power-up in Nightmares is the weapon drop power-up. This power-up will drop a random weapon on the ground with attachments. Picking up this power-up will cause the player to get rid of the gun in their hand and replace it with the power-up weapon. Thankfully, this power-up weapon does not have a time limit and can be used for the entire length of the mission. Easter eggs also make an appearance in Nightmares. These Easter eggs are simply song-based Easter eggs featuring several fan-favorite songs from previous Zombies maps, with each mission having a new song. These songs are obtained by getting collectibles throughout the mission. These collectibles are a nod to Zombies fans as they are in the form of the teddy bear. The overall gameplay in Nightmares is enjoyable, but like most game campaigns, it's a game loop that's enjoyable for the first playthrough, but it doesn't really have the replayability of Zombies or multiplayer. As mentioned before, the story of Nightmares is the main focus of the mode and has almost no connection to the traditional Zombies storyline, which makes sense with it being a campaign mode at the end of the day, but because of this section of the video will be the most in-depth, telling the entire story that is told while playing Nightmares. So, as a heads up, there will be several spoilers ahead. Nightmares takes place in the mind of the player. Yes, you heard that right. This means the story of Nightmares is told in a unique way where the player is recalling missions and different feelings, but dialogue that happened during the missions cannot be heard as the voices cannot be recalled by the player. Instead, the story is told from the player's thoughts and discussions happening during a questioning period. Before falling into a state between the living and the dead, the player used to be a dead killer. This group's goal is to exterminate the undead after virus 6115 spread across the world. Dead killers typically were equipped with robotic limbs and a direct neural interface, or DNI, making them stronger as well as integrating with systems across the world. The first Nightmares mission starts with the player hearing voices from 2 different Greek demigods by the name of Dolos and Deimos. Shortly after hearing this voice, another voice is heard, this one addressing the player. This new voice is Dr. Salim, who informs the player that they have fallen into this voided state. Shocked by the news, the player begins questioning her state as she was on a quest to stop Deimos from doing something that at the time we don't really know about. Salim had connected to the player's DNI and has her recall the beginning of her journey to stop Deimos. The mission that the player recalls is with her and her colleague Hendrix on their first mission alone in 2070. This mission was to the quarantine zone in Singapore at the Coalescence site. The team went to the site after losing contact with another team that was sent to the area to manage the undead. This other team consisted of members Taylor and Diaz. While our player's team was searching the area, they discovered an unusual activity in the bottom level of the building. Below the bottom level of Coalescence, the team discovered a classified CIA project by the name Project Corvus. While fighting off the undead in Project Corvus area, the team accidentally discovers a human testing facility, where it becomes apparent that the CIA had created the outbreak as an end to a nearly 10-year Cold War. With most subjects having DNIs installed, the CIA was also experimenting with the ability to control the undead. After discovering the testing area, the team noticed the signal was coming from the server room below the testing facility. Upon entering the server room, the team noticed that Diaz was connected to the server with his DNI and was deactivating the defenses for the quarantine zones, allowing the undead to enter. Unfortunately, the only way to stop Diaz was to destroy the server and kill him in the process. Upon Diaz's death, Hendrix interfaced with Diaz's DNI to figure out more about Taylor's disappearance. After interfacing, Hendrix actually found out that Taylor was trying to get out of Singapore. Hendrix also found out that Taylor's team was obsessed with Deimos. Shortly after the arrival of the player and Hendrix, a group by the name of the 54 Immortals arrived at the scene of the Coalescence site and would blow up the facility in attempts to avoid another outbreak, unknowing the player and Hendrix were in the facility. The team was able to escape after the explosion by swimming out of the facility, where the player begins to notice that Hendrix has become more aggressive after interfacing with Diaz. After escaping Singapore, Dr. Salim now instructs the player to think back to the time that they first met Taylor. This takes the player to 2065 in Zurich, where the player is describing dead killers to Dr. Salim, informing him that Taylor was the first ever dead killer and that they were engineered to be immune to 6115. Shortly after this, the player recalls a raid against a group called the Cortardists. This group believed that the undead were the next evolution of humans and that they should be free to roam the earth. While being led by Diaz through a raid, the player begins to hallucinate, seeing robots tear her apart. Salim informs the player that this is just her mind playing tricks on her. The team reaches a terminal in which Diaz has the player interface with it, where she discovers the name and address of the Cortardist contact at Coalescence. This contact had access to 6115. After obtaining this information, the memory switches to the team preparing to breach into the contact's apartment. When he escapes, the team discovers with his help the Cortardist had armed a bomb containing 6115 on a train headed towards the middle of Zurich. This much exposure would turn the entire city into the undead. After discovering this, the team finds the train car containing the bomb. Unfortunately, with limited time, the player cannot deactivate it. The player then remembers that she cannot be infected by 6115 and detaches the car, saving the rest of the train and the city. By 2075, there were 7 billion undead with only a few 100 million humans left. The next memory takes the player back to a fight against the Cotardists after they took over a refinery. During a part of this mission, the player's DNI malfunctions while they are swimming through a flooded room. Shortly after this, the player hears Dolos say not to trust him. Salim also begins to ask several questions about one of the members of the team on this mission named Kane. Even though this was the first time the player and Kane had worked together, Kane somehow knew everything the player did about Taylor. Another member of the team named Khalil was able to access the footage that showed Taylor and Moretti at the refinery, with Taylor being escorted by the Cotardists. The player's new directive was to stop Moretti before he escaped. This had led the player to the generator room, where Moretti had locked himself in. Similar to Diaz, the player is forced to kill Moretti. However, before they do, Moretti tells the player that Deimos is making them act this way, and the only way to find Deimos is to find Moretti's old colleague named Bishop. Damian Bishop was the only person who was able to create a cure for 6115. Even though this cure would have stopped the spread, something was stopping it. Bishop believed that there was an undead brain that was controlling the others, causing the cure to not work. This memory takes the player back to 2065, where they were working to free Bishop from the NRC, where he and his team were being tortured to try to get information on the cure. After rescuing Bishop from the NRC, he forces the team to save the rest of his research team. Even though their mission was only to save Bishop, they agreed. Upon taking an elevator, the player sees the dead killers for the first time, where she becomes confused as she sees Taylor. Shortly after, Dolos can be heard telling the player to remember her past. The player realizes this memory is before her limbs were replaced. The player and Hendrix escort Bishop and Khalil, one of Bishop's team members at the time, to an extraction site. Unfortunately, the helicopter is forced to leave before the player is able to enter the helicopter. This causes the player to be attacked by robots, having her limbs torn apart. The player also also recalls that this is the day that she really met Taylor and became a dead killer. Following Moretti's instructions, the team returned to Singapore to find a data drive on Deimos that was locked in the safe house. Little did the team know that Goju Lan, one of the leaders of the 54 Immortals, had taken over the city and managed to get the undead to obey her. Go had locked herself inside of a safe house. As the team approaches the safe house, the building exploded and began creaking. The player enters the building anyways in search of the drive. However, instead finds Kane tied to a chair. As the player begins to free Kane, Go sneaks up behind the player and attacks her. In the heat of the moment, the player kills Go and escapes the building with Kane. Unfortunately, was not able to find the drive, assuming it was burned to the ground with the building. Kane went to the safe house in search of the data drive on Deimos. Kane had found out that the drive was actually moved from the safe house to a CIA black station prior to their arrival. Kane also informed the team that Goju Lan was not trying to kill her. Instead, Deimos was controlling Goju Lan and was puppeting her to kill Kane. With Go gone, a new group of scavengers called the Vultures took over Singapore. Kane informed the team that the drive had been split into two parts and that both were needed to access the files. While trying to get one of the drive parts, a Vulture had cornered the player and Hendrix. Thankfully, Kane was able to sneak up on the Vultures and save them. The player describes Kane to Dr. Salim as someone who was always in the right place at the right time. After entering the black site, the team found several CIA members dead. On the drive, however, they found out that Project Corvus was a CIA mind control experiment, that the scientists had combined two biochemical compounds, Nova 6 and Element 115. This mix was injected into the subject's DNA in an attempt to control them. The lab under coalescence was filled with prisoners that the CIA believed they could make better. There was also information on the drive that Taylor's team was working for Deimos and helped him trigger the disasters. While recalling information that was on the drive, the player recalls the name of the key researcher at Project Corvus being Dr. Salim. In 2075, the player recalls a mission to the Ramses station in Cairo. The team discovers that Salim had been captured by the NRC and is being held at the station. Upon rescuing him, the player and Hendrix interrogate him to find out how to stop Deimos. During this time, Salim informs Hendrix that Bishop's assumption about a single brain controlling the undead was correct, and that brain was Deimos. Salim explains that Deimos is an ancient deity that seeks to reopen a gateway to his home dimension Malum, to bring forth an army of the dead and destroy his sister Dolos. Salim tells the player that the only way to stop him is to open the gateway herself and send Deimos back. However, as the mission progresses, the undead swarm the station. Dolos whispers to the player that Salim is lying, claiming that opening the gateway will not stop Deimos, but instead trigger a global catastrophe that wipes out the remaining human population. The hunt for Taylor's rogue team leads the player to Sarah Hall at an Egyptian research facility. Upon locating her, the player attempts to interface with Hall's DNA to extract information. However, the connection triggers a maladaptive dreamscape, dragging the player into a surreal, nightmare version of the Battle of Balls from World War II. Throughout the vision, the voice of Dr. Salim, who is actually Deimos masquerading as the doctor, explains that Hall's mind is being harvested to create a bridge between the physical world and the realm of Malum. At the end of the hallucination, the player finds Hall dying. Before she passes, though, she reveals the terrifying truth. The frozen forest is not a sanctuary, but instead a digital purgatory used by the gods of Malum to store human souls as fuel. After this, the player is forced to kill Hall to end the dreamscape. The world returns to reality, but the player is no longer alone in her own head. Deimos reveals that by interfacing with Hall, he has successfully entered the player's mind, just as he did with the rest of Taylor's team. However, Deimos admits that the player is far stronger than he anticipated. While he can influence her, he is unable to achieve the total control. The chase leads back to Cairo, where Taylor has occupied the Lotus Towers. The city is in a state of total collapse. The player and Hendrix fight through waves of NRC and undead to reach the top of the tower, where Taylor, controlled by Deimos, is piloting a mothership. Throughout the ascent of the tower, Dolos can be heard telling the player to let Deimos win, and that the only way to beat him is to actually let him win. After a brutal battle, Taylor crashes the ship, and the player is pinned down. In a sudden moment of clarity, though, Taylor rips his own DNA out of his skull, attempting to sever Deimos' control. Before he can finish, Hendrix, now fully controlled by Deimos, kills Taylor and steals the mothership, setting a course for Zurich to open the gateway. Kane rescues the player, and they head to Switzerland to stop Deimos once and for all. The final memory returns the player to Zurich in a total collapse. Under Deimos' control, Hendrix, rogue robots, and the undead have turned the city into a graveyard. Alongside Kane, the player pushes through the carnage to the Coalescence Corporation. Inside the facility, the team discovers the source of the nightmare, Virus 6115. Reaching a contamination lab, the player's DNI shows a critical leak. Kane heroically enters a decontamination chamber to seal the breach, only to realize too late that Deimos falsified the toxicity readings. He manipulated the system to isolate the player and killed Kane with a lethal concentration of the virus. The player awakens in Malum, facing a human personification of Deimos. Dolos reveals that she had been Kane all along. She manifests a spectral version of John Taylor to serve as the player's companion. Together, they fight through warped memories of the Singapore disaster to reach the heart of the network. There, the player initiates a manual DNI purge, successfully eradicating Deimos' consciousness.
I am Deimos, demigod of dread and terror!
The player awakens back on Earth in the ruins of Zurich. Dolos appears, explaining that with Deimos dead, the hierarchy of gods is shattered, leaving the universe in a state of supernatural anarchy. The player is now fully aware of her power and accepts a new mission alongside Dolos. Standing amidst the debris, she settles on one final plan.
We kill every last one of these motherfuckers.